We're, Wulf Cattle is now expanded, many of you know, to Nebraska in Sandy Ridge Ranch. And being in Nebraska, I give Dr. Matt Spangler from the University of Nebraska a call early this summer. Asked him to come up, take a tour of the operation, and we spent the afternoon together with him and some of the team and talked about developing a long-term relationship. And for those of you who don't know Matt, I think he's one of the sharpest young scientists in the country right now. And I've heard him speak at different places, and I asked him to come talk about feed efficiency and give us an industry perspective.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Relative to how intelligent I am, so this week is spring break in Lincoln, Nebraska, and most of the undergraduate students headed south, and I find myself in Minnesota in a snowstorm. So with that in mind, you may question a little bit of my intelligence. So I'm a geneticist, and that's kind of the approach I take to this subject. Not a nutritionist and not an economist, but the reason why we're interested in really selecting for improved feed utilization is that feed costs account for about 66% of variable costs in calf feeding systems and roughly 77% in yearling finishing systems. Those are estimates, but I think it sets the stage for how important it is to at least develop some tools and place some selection pressure on trying to improve feed utilization. I think a traditional metric to gauge how cattle have done, things that we have tools for to select on, are things just simply like growth, average daily gain. And there's some work in 2001 that showed a 10% improvement in gain could increase profit by about 18%, but a 10% improvement in efficiency can increase profit by 43%. So it's not just output that we're concerned with. It's the relationship between output and input that really drives profitability. So again, why improve efficiency? Bob Weber, a colleague of mine at Kansas State, in 2011 estimated that really a 2-pound reduction in RFI across the feeding sector could reduce feed costs by $1.2 billion. So a ton of room for improvement relative to improving the utilization of feed. And I understand that the next statement sounds like something that us academicians would just champion when we want to get grant money. But honestly, fewer resources used does improve global food security, and that's something I actually believe. And a critical component when we talk about feed efficiency is inherently contemplating both output and input, okay, at the same time, which makes it multiple trait selection. So these estimates are a little bit different than what Jerry showed you to start with, but it tells the same story. We've got salmon converting at roughly 1-to-1, chicken at 2-to-1, pork at 3-to-1, and then beef at 6-to-1. And by no means is the goal to get beef to convert at 2-to-1 over the entire industry, right? It's not going to happen. But there's a tremendous amount of room to make improvement, and that, I'll argue later on, is pretty much a lot of untapped potential. So we do have competing protein resources that have been selecting for improved feed efficiency for a tremendously long time, and poultry people have improved feed efficiency by 250% since the late 1950s. That's a dramatic change. And if those of you that grew up with a few chickens in the backyard and you remember what a chicken carcass used to look like, and compare that to a chicken carcass that you see in the grocery store today, that's a different beast, completely different beast. And actually, it's a nice success story to what selection can do. They made a dramatic improvement, and the really nice thing is, after all of that improvement, we still don't see a reduction in genetic variation in feed efficiency in chickens. So they can still make additional improvement. So measures of feed efficiency, and I think Ken Anderson will visit about this a little bit, but there's a lot of different things. So when we throw out a general term efficiency, what do we really mean? Are we talking about feed to gain or the reciprocal gain to feed? Are we talking about residuals, be it residual feed intake or residual average daily gain? Are we just talking about dry matter intake? So it's important to realize what those measurements actually are. Because the fact of the matter is, depending on which one of those I choose to select, it's going to lead me to different animals, okay? Because they're not all the same trait. So it's important to realize that whatever measure I use is going to dictate which animal becomes the best, all right? So we're not always going to see feed-to-gain animals, the best feed-to-gain animals, be the best RFI animals, okay? Be the best average daily gain animals. That's not always going to be the case, and it's important to understand that. I understand that the theme here is really feed efficiency in a feeding sector context, but if we think about efficiency of the cow herd in general, there's a few things that we need to consider. And you guys, I'll give you a few seconds to write this down. The test later will be open book, so just write it down, you'll be fine. If we think about dam weight, cow weight, okay, it has some salvage value. In a cow herd, we want to increase the number of progeny she has per year. The output for them is the lean value of those. The cost of those is the feed that they eat. So you've got a lot of things flowing into the profitability of a cow herd, right? So it means you need to select for multiple traits at the same time. And to improve overall cow herd efficiency, it's not just improving the efficiency of the calves when they hit the feed yard. It's also keeping into check reproductive efficiency in the cow herd. And there's a few simple things that can be done to improve both those in the feeding sector and in the cow herd outside of a lot of the fancy things we talk about today. And that's correct breed utilization, right? Implementing a crossbreeding program helps the cow herd. There's also some tangible advantages in the feed yard. And pairing the correct breeds together has tremendous advantages as well. A perfect example of that, and I would say it even if I wasn't here, is the beef dairy program. Making half-blood Limousin, for instance, half-blood dairy cattle in the feed yard, perfect pairing of breeds. So we need to keep in mind the breeds that we choose and the benefits of crossbreeding and heterosis. So the success we've had for output traits, these are genetic trends for weaning weight, and you can see Angus and Limousin on there. A lot of progress in weaning weight in both of those breeds, and the same would be true for yearling weight. This is what EPDs and selection has done for output traits. Unfortunately, we have not made the same progress in efficiency, and this is closeout data shared to me by Dan Lloyd, Iowa State, from the late 70s to early 90s. We improved feed efficiency slightly over those decades, not tremendously, but slightly. And if you fast forward to the late 80s to early 2000s, pretty much flat. And I would say any advantages we've made in this are in large part due to technology. We have not really practiced direct selection to improve feed utilization. And there's a huge untapped resource there, a lot of potential to make tremendous improvement once we really do so on an industry-wide scale. What role does genetics play? On the diagonal, I have heritabilities of average daily gain, dry matter intake, residual feed intake, and gain to feed, which would be the same as feed to gain, just the reciprocal. And on the off diagonal, the genetic correlations. All these traits are at least moderately heritable. If we select for them, we can change them. Some of them are strongly related. Some, though, the relationship is moderate to close to zero. For instance, RFI and average daily gain, we expect that to be zero. Here I have a small correlation with the standard error. It is zero. Okay, so these traits definitely have underlying genetic control. To quickly kind of summarize, we need to think about efficiency, I would argue, in terms of economics. And really selection in general needs to be couched in terms of economics. If I select bulls, I want to select the ones that are the most profitable. At the end of the day, that's the objective. I'm a big proponent, regardless of the suite of traits, of index selection, and correctly doing that requires both input and output traits. And the great thing about technology, feed intake systems, is now we have the opportunity to actually gather data on the input traits and fit those hopefully into our national cattle evaluations. I work a great deal in genomics. I think genomics could help us in this regard down the road, but something for you guys to understand is that for genomics to work, we have to have phenotypes. We have to have phenotypes. So we don't develop genomic tests for something like feed intake if we don't have feed intake records. That's an important thing to realize. I'll put in a plug, beefefficiency.org, very large collaborative project funded by the USDA, focused on developing genomic selection tools for feed efficiency. There's the website. You can learn more about the project. And one last shameless plug, BIF is in Beef Improvement Federation meeting is in Lincoln, Nebraska this summer, June 18th through the 21st. If you're interested in genetics and beef cattle, that's a meeting to be at. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker, and I look forward to discussion later on.
Thank you, Matt. If you look in, if you haven't noticed on the back page or the third page actually of our supplement sheet, we do have feed efficiency data on 120 some bulls on the sale this year. Matt was the one who analyzed that data, actually calculated us a feed efficiency EPD and then the dollar index. So if you got any questions about that, Matt's our man to talk to. So thank you, Matt.